Hello, welcome back to History of Wine and the Vine. I'm Emily Kate. So when I do my research, I kind of keep an eye out for all different types of topics that I'd like to discuss with you guys. And one that's really been popping up a lot lately is the effect on the wine industry of things that seemingly have nothing to do with the wine industry. And you would be so surprised, maybe you wouldn't, but I was so surprised at how certain things really did completely change and shape the wine industry. And it's not necessarily like, oh, if it's hot or cold or things like that. It's things that are completely separate. So we have lots of things like illness and pandemics, like catastrophic weather events, royal edicts and conquest, discovery of certain lands, religion, and kind of in general geography and trade. So these things definitely had a huge impact on the wine industry, and so we'll kind of go through and discuss. So huge weather events kind of seems like the most normal one. So I kind of want to discuss a little bit about Vesuvius. So in 79 AD, Vesuvius erupted, and the thing was that this part of Italy kind of supplied a lot of Rome's wine. And so what happened was everybody got really busy replanting so many different vines, and trying to kind of remedy this deficiency. And it just so happened that it kind of at that end of the first century AD, there was an extremely poor grain harvest. And so this kind of brings in the whole Mediterranean Triad. So the Mediterranean Triad is kind of left over from the Greeks, and it's wine, olives, and grain. So they all should probably be, pretty steady and similar, and people tend to kind of have a bit of a, freak out if they're not. And so the emperor at the time saw that there was so much wine. I mean, there was just way too much wine because of all the replanting that was happening and because of all the attention put on wine. And then there was this terrible grain harvest. So he got very upset and ordered that all of the vines be cut down, and that only less than half of them should be surviving, and you can't plant anymore, and all kinds of different things, because everybody got so upset that there was hardly any grain and there was so much wine. So these kind of catastrophic weather events definitely have a huge impact for years to come on the wine, just because of the kind of balance of the Mediterranean Triad. Then we have illness, and illness kind of works similarly in that if there's a huge illness or pandemic in an area and everybody is dying off, generally a lot of the times these people are laborers, and so that means that there's not enough people to pick the grapes, and there's not enough people to kind of handle the harvest and the vintage and making the wine and shipping the wine. And this just completely alters the entire industry for a very long time after, because people are, a very slowly renewed resource. And so if you lose a huge part of your kind of working population, it takes a very long time for that to kind of come back. And then we have things like edicts. So in 212 AD, the emperor Caracalla actually bestowed citizenship upon all of these freed people in the empire, which is great and wonderful. But the thing is that at that point, you could only grow vines if you were a citizen. So now this took kind of this competitive advantage away from all of these people that previously were some of the only citizens. And now everybody was a citizen. And so everybody wanted to plant vines because they thought that, wow, this is going to make me so much money. But if everybody's doing it, it doesn't exactly. And so as you can see, it would kind of devolve into a big mess. Then we have Conquest and Discovery. So discovery is kind of obvious. When you go somewhere new, pretty much everybody would have vine cuttings with them to kind of plant and see what was able to grow in different places in conquests. But also, if you were kind of occupying an area, you needed to get wine out to your soldiers in that area. So they couldn't always necessarily get wine from the surrounding areas. And in order to keep the people happy who were keeping the citizens from rebelling against your rule, you would probably do what you could to make sure that you could get all the wine out there. So that doesn't sound that bad, but wine that travels further has to be kind of made differently and packaged differently, and all kinds of things have to be taken into consideration when you're making wine to ship elsewhere. and religion goes similarly. It's very interesting to kind of see the impacts of Islamic conquest on wine regions and kind of Christian conquest on wine regions, and they all have their own different kind of identities once they get there. And contrary to what some people may believe, all wine production and all grape growing did not stop when a place was conquered by a group that didn't drink wine. Just because you can't drink wine doesn't mean you can't make wine or make grapes, and maybe someone else makes wine. So there were a lot of different ways that kind of changed the balance, if you will, in a certain region when it was conquered by somebody. And then the last one that I think is rather visual is simply geography and trade, and how they kind of interact in order to shape what we know of today as the kind of modern wine regions. So I have a picture here for you, and this is along the Rhine and the Mosel, and these are before 1050. These are vineyards, and it's just this is kind of how history things work. It's about the first mention of it, so they're kind of broken up. But if you can just look, all of these are, they're all kind of dotted along, I'm hoping you can see, along rivers. And that's because for trade, it was a lot cheaper, like at least 5 times cheaper, to transport what you needed to transport via a like waterway and a channel rather than over land. Land was very expensive to travel over. And it was just much harder, so people would kind of put their, I mean, there were other reasons why you were putting your vineyards along rivers as well, but this was a very, very driving cause of putting your vineyard along a river, was kind of how easy, the ease of transport and the ease of trade that you would have from it, because making wine doesn't matter unless you sell it to somebody. So all of these things that kind of definitely had such a huge hand in shaping the wine industry of yesterday and today, I found kind of interesting and wanted to share with you. I hope you found it interesting as well, and I will see you next week. Cheers!